sit on that microphone.
Okay, welcome.
Oh, hello guys, how are you? Hey, nice to be in Amsterdam. Beautiful to be in Amsterdam. I promised I was going to wear something orange.
You didn't. I did.
Yeah, you reminded me. Yeah, tomorrow.
Okay,
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
We'll have it, yeah.
Tomorrow I won't have orange, but yeah.
I might wear your top.
Okay,
I'll
yeah,
borrow
that's
it,
fine.
yeah.
You can wear it.
If I show up in a little orange crop top tomorrow, you know where it came from.
It might fit around your head.
Okay.
Well, welcome to Amsterdam Comic Con. How are you liking it so far?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I like to get, you know, I really like to travel when I get to a country and sort of see something of the history and the, you know, look into the culture and see if I can sort of, you know, just learn some more about it. You know, unfortunately, this trip I'm sort of in and out, so people keep going to me, what do you know about, you know, Amsterdam? And I mightn't get time this trip, but I was here before. I've done the canal tour.
That's mandatory.
Yeah, I've done the canal tour. I walked past the window. I was like, hello. Okay. Yeah. I had a cup of coffee.
A cup of coffee.
A cup of coffee, yes. Definitely.
Yeah.
That's it. But yeah, you know, yeah, I know William of Orange. William of Orange. Yeah.
Yes.
That's how we all got the orange color. Yeah. William of Orange. But then somebody, like, is that right?
Yeah.
Can anybody explain to me what happened to William of Orange? Like,
he was shot.
He was shot, really, but,
yeah.
but was it just opposition? Like he'd made enemies? Is that what it was? He'd made enemies? So
I think it was an assassin of some kind. Does anyone know the story of William of Orange? I think it was an assassin in a town called Delft. He was shot.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And they still have the bullet holes in the wall. Over there, you can still see the bullet holes in the wall where he was shot.
Oh, he was shot, really?
Yes.
Wow.
Like about
I was in Rome recently, and it was crazy. This friend of mine came up to me and he said, Manu, do you want to see something really interesting? And I was thinking, like, well, I'm in Rome, you know, and so there's pretty interesting stuff anyway. But he had this look in his eye, and I was like, what do you mean by interesting? And he said, come. I'm going to show you something really interesting. And so we walked up to this certain part of Rome that's kind of like, the houses are like on a slant. It's like an amphitheater. And that's what it is. Basically, the ancient theater of Rome is like an amphitheater in the center of Rome that they just built over the top of. But the buildings that are sitting on top of it are still sloping at the same angle as the amphitheater. And you know, some stories tell about Caesar being assassinated, because if we're going to talk about assassinate kids, if we're going to talk about assassination, let's let's go back to Julius Caesar. See, because he got assassinated by his you know, Brutus and a whole bunch of you know, people. But you know, some people think that happened you know, maybe at the, you know, the, anyway, it happened at the theater, at the Roman theater. And of course, everybody thinks that the theater doesn't exist anymore because it's got buildings over the top. So my friend says, come to this restaurant. And so we go to this little restaurant, and he says, come and have a look in the broom cupboard. So we walk over and we open up the broom cupboard, and there's a staircase leading down into this cavern that then goes into the ancient theater of Rome. The owners of the actual pizza shop or whatever it is, they filled in a wall that if you go through that wall, you'll end up in the theater of Rome, where Julius Caesar died. It's so incredible. But they filled it in so that in case, you know, I hope I'm not blowing their cover right now. Like somebody in Italy is going like, oh yes, okay. But yeah, basically they filled it in so that if the people come down and say like, this is, they'll go, oh, it's blocked off at your property, so we can't, you know, it's sort of, it walls off. Because if it's joined to the next part, then they'll lose their restaurant. But it was so fascinating, especially as an actor, because the rooms at the bottom seem to be like the changing rooms of the of the ancient actors and stuff like that. So it was really quite a buzz. It was a buzz. Anyway, that all came from William of Orange.
From the Orange, yeah.
Oh, what's the story? 3 bullets.
He was.
He was a traitor in the eyes of Spain.
Yeah.
Are there any Spanish people here?
Me?
Oh, no.
Sorry?
Exactly. It's funny how it all kind of weaves together. All our ancestries. We've got some brooding pasts. But yeah. Anyway, should we move on?
Yeah. I just want to congratulate you on your new part in the sci-fi series Pandora.
Thank you.
I read that you got that. Can you tell us a bit more about? Can you tell us anything about it?
Oh, about Pandora? Does anybody know about Pandora? Does anybody watch Pandora?
A new sci-fi show? He can tell you all about it.
Okay. It's only just started, really. It only just got released in America, but it's on CW, the same as Arrow. You know, so I was in Greece 4 weeks ago, and I got a phone call, and they said the show wants you to come on and play a space cowboy kind of guy, you know. Rutger Hauer. Yeah. Well, you know, I just made a post about him a week beforehand when he passed away. Of course, you know, like Tears in Rain was one of my. Actually, if I think about it, that little monologue of his is probably the most memorable monologue from an actor that I can think of. I mean, the amount of empathy that you have for a robot antagonist, you know, or a hybrid, whatever he was just such a beautiful, beautiful performance. And just funnily enough, when they sent me this script and I read it, all I could see was Roy Batty. It was all I could see in this role was going like, oh, Rutger Hauer would have just made really great lines out of this, because it's like poetry what this particular character speaks. So I thought, you know, what is this show? And my agent said, oh, it's something that's filming for CW in Bulgaria. And I was like, okay. Like, what's the story? You know, what's going on? And anyway, am I allowed to talk about my negotiations in public?
Sure.
Anyway, so whenever you negotiate for a script when you're an actor, they offer you really, really shitty money, right? And then you got to play this game of negotiation. And they'll ring back and they'll say like, oh, we don't have any money left. There's no more money. You can't offer you any more money. And so you have to make a decision where you're going to say yes or no. But, you know, your agent might say to you, if you don't say yes, you're going to lose this role. And then you have to think about, well, you know, it's CW, I was on Arrow, you know, maybe they want all the Arrow sort of fans to come across and watch Pandora and whatnot, which is probably what will happen, right? We have to sort of play this sort of game of cat and mouse in a certain way. And in the end, you know, I just sort of said no, no, no until I got what I wanted, you know, which is, you know, it's tough. I'm telling you, as an actor, you can really sort of not get what you're worth. And, you know, you've really got to stick to your guns sometimes. And I stuck to my guns, and that made me feel good to go and do this job.
I think everything's fine.
Is that like somebody's scooter? It's like somebody's scooter's got an alarm?
Somebody opened the door, the alarm door.
Oh, really? Spider-Man, can you go check out who that is? Just give him one of those things.
Friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, please. Oh,
there we go. Thank you. Anyway, so I got to Bulgaria and met a really wonderful cast. All the people on Pandora, really, really cool cats. Bulgaria is an interesting country, very interesting country. You know, lots of Eastern Europe, you know, are really in the grip of sort of, you know, changing toward certain directions and being pulled towards other directions. And just to be honest, it's a very interesting country, beautiful people. But you know, just you know, every country has its own political story and its own history, and very eye-opening. Yeah, it was an interesting place to be, but the filming that we did there was you know, was really, really wonderful. Good project to be a part of. And you know, of course, you know, I sat in this scene and I thought to myself, because this, I walk in on this, I can't talk about the scene. I can't talk about the scene. But anyway, I got to deliver this poetry, and the whole time I just thought about Tears in Rain, you know. And there was moments in it that I think I lent some of Rutger Hauer's, you know, acting brilliance, and tried to, 1 week after his death, breathe a little bit of Rutger back into the world, you know. And you know, I met this wonderful actor standing over here. You all know who that is? Okay, Hugo, we met a couple of nights ago, and somebody said to me, oh, Hugo's the new Rutger Hauer, you know, of Holland and whatnot. And anyway, anyway, it's nice to be here in you know, the land of Rutger Hauer, having done his performances recently, which I dedicated to him, and I think I've run out of that conversation.
Yeah, I don't remember where we started. We started with Orange. So one thing I would like to know, I heard that your audition for Arrow was quite a funny story, but I haven't heard it. Have you heard it?
Oh, my audition for Arrow? Has anybody heard it? Oh, you guys have heard it, yeah, okay. You want me to tell it again? Okay. Where's the guy from the military? Is the guy from the military here? Oh, there you are, brother, yeah. So I was in Kuwait, visiting the U.S. forces. You know, the USO. You know, it's an organization that takes entertainers in to meet the, you know, the brave soldiers that are, you know, facing war. A bit of a distraction, I guess, for them. You know, something to keep them entertained in the midst of what it is they're having to go through. Anyway, so I arrived in Kuwait, and I met all these young soldiers, and you know, it was pretty much just like sitting here, except there was a bunch of special forces guys, you know. And I was in this room with the elite of the local, you know, battalions, and I said, "You guys are like the real deal, right? You know, you're all about to fly into Afghanistan, or you're all about to fly somewhere, and there's going to be real battle to be a part of. You know, I fought as Crixus, you know, on a set where, you know, they call cut. And I go off the side and I have a cup of coffee and then go back in with a bit of makeup on and fight again. So I've got nothing but you know, kind of a, you know, look, my ancestors, my great-great-grandfather was like a real warrior. He was known as the only person that our tribe would follow into battle if he was at the front. So I'm sure that somehow through my lineage I have that, we call it Wairua, which is the spirit of my ancestors coming through. But you know, I live in a different country now. You know, we're sort of you know, part of the Commonwealth. You know, the treaty between the Commonwealth and the Maori people created a relevant peace for the last 3 generations. Like the Hawaiians, we're arguing over a bit of land still. We're arguing about our rights as a culture to maintain our language, maintain our practices as a culture. But anyway, so I'm in Kuwait, and in front of these guys, I say, who's the toughest guy here? Like, who's like Rambo? And they all point toward this bald-headed guy, right? That didn't look like anything special. He looked like a guy that you just meet in the pub, a little bit of weight around his stomach. You know, he wasn't ripped with muscles. He was just, who can I find? Who can I find? I'll take the soldier. Come, brother, come up. Okay, he's the river. So they said this guy, and his name was Knight. And they went, Knight, Knight, Knight. And Knight came up onto the stage, and it really, see the unassuming nature of him? Like, this guy is a military guy. But like, you know, you meet these guys, and they just are really like, you know, like you meet an actor, and there's automatically a kind of an air of self-esteem or confidence. Because our thing is a bit of an outward kind of thing. But you meet soldiers who are really trained well, and they're not really that outwardly, you know, aggressive. They're not like security guards that you meet either that stand there and do all this sort of stuff. They're usually guys that are well trained, but actually kind of like hard to read. And this guy was really hard to read. When he came up, I didn't think much of him at all. I thought, really, this is Rambo? And I said to him, hey, said, tell me something. I said, listen, you know, like, I watched that footage on YouTube where they're in the helicopter and they show the guys, you know, going into villages and they're like, you know, heat maps, are sort of heat sort of radar things are showing them as green figures. And when they get into a village, you know, and I heard that dogs start barking, so they have to shoot the dogs and stuff like that to stop the noise, and then they sort of get in, like, you know, when you come into those hand-to-hand combat situations, I mean, you know, what do you do? Like, if you can't shoot the gun, you want to keep it quiet. Like, what do you do? And I'm sort of questioning, like, this next minute, he grabbed me in a chokehold. Do you want to get me in a chokehold? I bet he knows how to do it. Oh, not that hard. But that was great. That was awesome. He's serious. This guy's going to do exactly what this guy did in Kuwait, I'm telling you. I should never ask a soldier to show me how to do the death grip or anything like that. But he got me in the one that's like, he got me in that one. And he's doing the same thing, I'm telling you. These guys, it's just automatically in their abilities. And all of a sudden he started choking me out in front of this whole group of people who had come to see Crixus and Azog or whatever, you know. And I just started going. I started fainting. And I grabbed him by the balls as hard as I could. Because I thought that I'd just flight, it was just the survival instinct. And he told me the next day, he said, oh, you know, that was a good move. Like, I almost let go, but, you know, that's what you should do, actually. And, but, you know, I sort of, you know, I almost went, and then he let go. But first of all, the first thing he said to me, he whispered in my ear, he went, relax, kid. And he called me kid. He went, relax, kid. And I was like, and then he sort of let me go, and I was like, whoa, wow, thank you. Thanks for almost knocking me unconscious in front of a whole bunch of, you know, fans of Crixus. Now I look like an absolute wimp, right? And it was just like him, like exactly that same sort of look. It was completely unassuming. Trust me, a second ago when he grabbed me like that, this guy knows what's going on. But thank you. But wait up. I'm gonna wait a second. No, wait 1 second. I got my comeback in a second. So anyway, so I said to this guy, let's hang out for the next couple of days, and I hung out with him, and he told me some stories, not a lot, you know, soldiers don't really like talking about this stuff, but he told me a few things, practical things, you know, and then one of the things that he had in his backpack was he had this, I have terrible jet lag. I'd flown from New Zealand to Kuwait, and it's like a 20-something hour flight. The day that we arrived, we had to go see the troops straight away, and we were really struggling for energy. And all the soldiers, all the you know, the guys have got like that 48-hour energy drink. Yeah, what's it called? Rip it. That's what it's called. Rip it, right? And so they have that in their packs because
this gives us a perk. It's our water pretty much.
Yeah, but also, like the Knight was telling me, you know, if you get caught in a situation where you're stuck in a battle and you can't get out, you can't go to sleep, and you've got to stay on it, then, you know, you pull that out and you give yourself a charge of like Mirakuru, right? Trust me, I'm bringing this up for a very specific point. When I left Kuwait, I decided, at the very last minute, I decided to go through Los Angeles to New Zealand, which was the long way. Going back the other way was the shorter way, but I decided I'd just go through Los Angeles for a couple of days and then go back to New Zealand. I had the Hobbit premiere. I jumped on a plane, I got to Los Angeles. The moment I got off the plane, I got into a taxi, and there was a billboard for Arrow. And Arrow had Stephen Amell. You know, Stephen Amell, who watches Arrow? Okay. So Stephen Amell had come to New Zealand when we were looking to replace the first Spartacus. You know, when Andy Whitfield had to be replaced, unfortunately. Stephen Amell was one of the actors that came. There was Liam McIntyre, Stephen Amell, and this other guy from New York. And I saw Stephen on the poster for, you know, eating at that, but he got Arrow. And I remember looking at the poster and going, oh, geez, there's Stephen Amell on Arrow. 2 days later, I was just about to go to the airport to leave, and my agent rang me and she said, Manu, where are you? And I said, I'm about to go to the airport. She said, we've got an audition for you. It's for this show called Arrow. And I was like, it was a big surprise for me because I was going like, I just saw his billboard. That's so weird that you say that, you know, because Stephen Amell came to New Zealand. I met him there. And she goes, okay, well, they want you to go in and read for this role. And I said, I'm going to go to the airport. She said, just go in, they'll give you the sides, you'll just do a cold read, but they just want to see you. So I drove, I got to this casting agency. I had really bad jet lag because I'd now come from Kuwait to Los Angeles. And I just had no energy. I had no real energy for the role. And then I went, oh, the 48-hour energy drink, RIP. And so I went out of my suitcase and I took this thing out and I dropped it. And I swear to you, when I was in my audition for Arrow, I was like on Mirakuru, completely. Because this thing just, I mean, by the time I got up the stairs, I was like, whoa, okay, this is energy. And then, of course, you walk in and there's a bunch of actors that are all walking around. Like there's 50 guys that look like me, better than me, stronger than me, bigger than me. And it's, you know, you walk into a LA audition and, you know, it can be a little bit intimidating because all these guys are walking around, you know, talking their lines, going like, you know, looking at you going like, then you got it. And then you start doing it, you're like, okay. I sat down, I grabbed the script and I started reading it, and you know, in Arrow, the opening scene was Oliver comes into the aeroplane, the downed aeroplane that he finds on the island, and as he's walking through, this figure drops from the ceiling and grabs him in a chokehold. And I'm sitting there reading this script, thinking, the chokehold. And so, and I'm listening to these guys that are in the lines that you had to read were, the figure drops from the ceiling, grabs Oliver in a chokehold, and says, you've got 10 seconds to tell me something I believe, kid, or I'm going to rip out your throat box. And I was listening to the other actors that were going in, and like, it was kind of like, you know, you're thinking like, how do you deliver that line? And you know, I could hear some guys go in there, some real American actors going in there, and they're going like, tell me something I believe, kid, or I'm going to rip out your fucking throat box. Excuse language, kids. And I was thinking, yeah, that guy's going a bit hard, you know. And the next guy would be in there and be like, you know, I'm going to rip out your throat box, man. I'm going to rip out your... And you're thinking like, barely hear that guy. It doesn't sound like he's on, you know, he's on the level, you know. And I was listening. I was trying to monitor, thinking like, geez, what's the right note to hit? And then they said, okay, Manu. Luckily, I got ahead a few of the guys because I knew I was going to the airport. And they said, okay, Manu, you ready? Can you come in? I said, yeah, I'll come in. Yeah. And I walked in, and there was, you know, the camera was set up like this camera over here, and you know, the casting director behind it, David Rappaport, who casts all of the CW series, a lot of big films as well. David Rappaport's behind the camera. And I'm like, hey, how you doing? And he goes, yeah, I like you in Spartacus, man. You did a great job. And I'm like, thank you, brother, thank you. And he goes, okay, well, you know, this guy is kind of like a, you know, he's some kind of a gruff military guy, you know, I don't want to tell you too much. We just want to see your take on it. You know, have you read the lines? You know, you can hold the sheet. We know you've only just read it for the first time. And I went, yeah. And I said, like, you know what? And I said, can I have the actor come in front of the camera? Can I actually get him in a chokehold? Can I hold him in a chokehold so I feel like I'm in the position? And this young guy's like, oh yeah, sure. Big mistake. Yeah. So he walks to the front of the camera. And I, you're a bit taller than he was, but anyway. Yeah, go ahead. Can you hold the microphone? So, I get him in this chokehold, right? And it took about 30 seconds before David Rappaport was ready with the camera, right? And I'm sort of in this, I've got him and I'm going like this. And David's like, okay, we're rolling. Are you ready? And I'm like, yeah, I'm ready. And he goes, okay, and action. And suddenly, I swear to you, the moment that he said action, I thought, what was the way that you know, Knight had said it back in Kuwait? He just whispered in my ear, you know. It was really unassuming the way that he'd said it to me. Can you hold it really close to his ear? And so yeah, that'll do. Okay. He goes, action. And I said, relax, kid.
You've got 10 seconds to tell me something I believe. You've got 10 seconds to tell me something I believe, or I'm going to cut out your throat box.
And it was better than that, I swear. The microphone wasn't amazing. But anyway, but at the moment that I said it, the guy, the reader, collapsed. Can you just lie on this before? Perfect. The reader collapsed unconscious on the floor. This is seriously my audition for Arrow. I'm standing in an LA casting agency in front of one of the guys who's one of the biggest casting agents, you know, in that genre. And I've knocked out the reader, like out cold. And at first I kind of panicked and I said, is this part of the script? And he said, no, I think you choked him out. And I was like, kid. I went, hey kid, you okay? And he came conscious. Luckily that stuff sort of knocks you out for a couple of seconds, you know, hopefully. And he got up and I was like, bro, are you okay? And he was like, yeah. He was like, I'm good. And then David Rappaport said, go to the bathroom and wash your face. You know, thanks, brother. Give this guy a big hand, by the way. And so off he went to the bathroom. And I was seriously, I was thinking, this is a big mistake. And maybe I'm never going to be asked for another, you know, audition with this person again, you know, and if not worse, you know. And I said, David, listen, I'm sorry, I've just been in Kuwait, and the moment that I read this script down the bottom there, you know, outside, I envisaged this special forces guy that I just met, who put me in a chokehold in front of this whole group of soldiers, almost to the point of me blacking out. And I was just trying to do the same sort of thing that he did, and trying to talk like his voice, and trying to bring this character that's really the top, you know, soldier in Kuwait, trying to bring his energy into this room. And obviously the chokehold works. And David Rappaport said, Manu, it was perfect. Come and check it out. So I ran around the back of the camera and we're looking at the camera and it's like, you know, it's like you see this guy going. I don't know whether I'm the only person who's knocked somebody out in the middle of a casting audition, not meaning to and not even promoting the idea, but that's how extraordinary the actual audition was. You know, and to this day I always think to myself, like, I would never have gotten that role, I don't think, unless I'd met this guy who was that guy. And so, you know, I have to thank this soldier called Knight, this special forces guy from Kuwait, for me playing Slade Wilson. But, you know, embodying his reality, embodying his spirit is what gave me that role, gave me the edge, you know? And you know, really my audition was just about playing a soldier and getting that truth to it. It wasn't until I got to the airport, I went to New Zealand for the Hobbit premiere, and then my agent rang me the morning after and said, Manu, they've offered you the role on Arrow, but they want you to fly tomorrow to Canada. Now I'd gone New Zealand, Kuwait, LA, Wellington, all the way back to Canada. And I was dying. I ended up with the worst flu. I got, you know, when you I got really run down with the worst flu. But I ended up getting to Canada, and I was in the line for like the immigration. I had to get papers to work on Arrow, and I got a message on my phone, and it was like a release from my agent had contacted me because there'd been a release in Hollywood Reporter or Variety or something that I was cast as Deathstroke. And I didn't, you know, when I did the audition, there was no mention of any Deathstroke. And I was on the phone to her and I went, that's not right, I never read for Deathstroke, I don't know what, that was not part of the audition. And the immigration guy behind the counter went, hey, you play Deathstroke? And I went like, and he went, man, he's the badass, man, he's the badass of the DC comic world. And that was the first time I ever even heard of that name. And that was the immigration guy at the yeah, anyway, that was the casting story.
I
I loved your role as Slade Wilson. And when you came back later on in Arrow, you had the storyline with your son. And it was very moving, very touching. How did you approach that? Because that's a very family-oriented story.
You know, it's sort of about, like, I'm a father, so, you know, when I played Crixus, it sort of reminded me of when I was in my 20s, and that's what Crixus. I've got to tell you, when I went for my audition for Spartacus originally, I walked in and the casting agent said to me, "What are you doing here, Manu?" And I said, "I'm here to read for, you know, the Spartacus series." And she said, "You're too old." You know, those guys were like 20 years old back in the day, you know. You're way too old. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then she asked me to get in front of the camera and I was like, "Oh, shall we begin?" I did a bit of that, but, you know, but then I got called back later. Later they cast people that were older. I only think because, you know, this is not the case with every country, but in, you know, most countries, if you're young now, you're not involved in, you know, it just depends where you're from. You know, but you know, if you come from Australia or New Zealand, you probably haven't had battle experience at the age of 20. Whereas back in those days, you did. So you probably had the 1,000-yard stare already. You know, so, yeah, it was just something that they ended up casting people in their 30s for those roles. But yeah, you know, the storyline had gone, you know, quite a long way from the comic book, you know, interpretation of Deathstroke. You know, and the Mirakuru was a big part of that. And, you know, of course, there was all these incidents with, you know, grabbing Felicity and killing his mother and stuff like that, that really sort of put a big slant on Deathstroke as well, as far as I was concerned, like he was only fighting women, and not saying that's I don't want to get into that whole can of worms, but, you know, I was just wondering where Deathstroke, like the real strong, powerful, you know, Marv Wolfman character was, you know, going to emerge with some sort of honor to that character, you know, the gold and the black being kind of like, you know, the shining example in the darkness and all this sort of stuff. And I always tried to layer those very deep, you know, they're great characters to play. You know, it's very Shakespearean to be sort of like, you know, led down the path of, you know, Shadow was killed by Oliver, you know, and you're told one story like Iago whispering in your ear, and you're becoming the bad guy, but really you're just kind of like Othello. You're kind of like, in your own perception, you're right, and the information you're receiving, you're right, but you're going to go as dark as the material goes because the human nature's like that. Regardless of whether you're the right person or the wrong person, there's a certain amount of information that's going to drive you crazy. And that's where I went with Slade Wilson, you know, and I sort of looked at it like substance abuse as well, you know, trying to rationalize it. But by the time we went down that rabbit hole, we went a long way, and I was wondering how the hell they're going to recover this character that's so popular and strong in the comic book world, you know? Like, he's dark, but he's not kind of this kind of basket case, you know, kind of guy. And I kind of wanted, I was hoping that somehow they could recover that storyline. Mark Guggenheim rang me and he said to me, "Listen, we'd like you to come back. We've got some clearance from Warner Brothers," because Warner Brothers took the character out because of the movie with Joe Manganiello and whatnot. But they said, "Oh, look, we've got a window of opportunity to bring you back right now. We're going to bring you back and we're going to introduce your son." And I suddenly thought, like, wow, okay, like I'm going to play a father role, you know. And that for me, being a father, you know, came with automatic sort of gut reactions and ideas of care and responsibility. And you know, the way that they crafted the story about, you know, Joe being this young boy that, you know, he'd take camping and at the same time assassinate some guy in the woods, you know, whilst his son is cooking marshmallows over the log fire, you know, really kind of enabled this kind of like man living in two different worlds and still trying to be a father. And I mean, to be honest, darling, you know, I cope with that. I have to cope with that myself. You know, here I am over in Amsterdam, you know, being an actor and responding to a crowd and having to earn my money as a responsible father, just to have to go back to my kids who don't give a damn if I'm Deathstroke or Azog or Crixus or anything. I'm just dad. You know, and if I talk about that stuff, they're going to go like, So, you know, all of a sudden the responsibility of playing Deathstroke had to give way to a real relationship between father and son. And that's what I found most interesting about that the nuances of the character in that particular telling of that storyline. And one of the beautiful things that helped kind of like bring Slade and Oliver back together, because originally we were like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker, you know, that was us on Lian Yu until the Mirakuru came along, which he injected me with, by the way. but you know, so, you know, that opening scene where he comes down to Lian Yu and I'm behind the bars and he says, Slade, you know, I need your help. And by the time he's turned around, I've fidgeted the door and made my way out, which creates this big suspense. Oh no, there's no bars between them. And I'm like, kid, did you forget that I just killed you? You know, I say something like, have you forgotten that I killed your mother? And it was like this. I remember asking him that question, like seriously, you know, like this Mirakuru has gone. I don't have it in my system anymore. And it was like, I remember it like some horrible dream. But do you not remember what has happened? And he said to me, Slade, we both have sons. We both need to find our sons. I need your help, you need mine. And then I looked at him and I said, you and me, kid, just like old times, you know. And it was kind of like this line that, and I realized in the moment that regardless of all that stuff that had gone on in the background, we were going to go through the door and re-emerge, you know, like, even though I killed his mother, which was kind of crazy. But, you know, I didn't think they could find that kind of redemption that quickly, but it kind of happened that quickly. And then, but you know, then I tried to play a certain way. I spoke to the directors about, can we try to make this because there was meant to be a time when I was helping him out to, you know, at one stage and I was with Joe, which, the way the scenes were written, they weren't written quite as much as though Slade would betray him. But I had a chat with Mark Guggenheim and I said, you know what, in this scene, how about we push it a bit so that maybe Slade might betray him there? And they agreed, you know, that this would be the best way to do it, to play it like that. Because really, the end of that particular episode was, am I going to turn against my own son? And that was a big ask. And in that moment, I don't know, you know, I mean, if you're an actor looking for dramatic premise to really work the mechanisms and work the emotions, it was just a fantastic moment, you know, and you know, it was a good comeback. And you know, in the end, you know, walking off into the smoke, you know, it just left Deathstroke back where Deathstroke should be. And you know, whether I ever get back on Arrow or whether that character emerges through Joe Manganiello in the film world or whoever, you know, I was really happy that we'd taken the integrity of the character back to where it should be in the comic book world. That was important, and we achieved that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid we're out of time for today.
Oh, come on, one more question. One more. Look.
One more. Okay. Well,
Two.
okay.
Which scene was your favorite part of Spartacus?
What scene was my favorite scene in Spartacus? So many, darling. Really, so many. I mean, the stuff with Navia through the bars, because I played like the two-dimensional, you know, in Spartacus's face. I played the. I'll tell you a little story. They don't have an orchestra. I guess there's no orchestra. They can't cut to the commercial either. Okay, so I got into acting when I was 14, 15 years old. Actually, I got into dance and music. Lost my mother and brother in a car accident, you know, so my life as a young man became automatically challenged by, like when you have that amount of loss all of a sudden and that amount of trauma all of a sudden, you know, how do you deal with it? You know, how, like it'll bottle up inside of you and kill you even as a young person, you know. And you know, I had a girlfriend who was a ballerina, and they needed some guys to be in a production of of when you're a jet all the way home, the first cigarette to your last day and day. Yeah, West Side Story. So I went in and I started doing this dancing, and I was doing some break dancing as well, and you know, if I had this energy that was burning inside of me, I'd just get up there on the break dancing thing and go, come on man, let's go, you know. It helped. It helped. You know, I just suddenly found out that expressing myself helped. Ballet, you know, I lost my mum, so, you know, when I was dancing with a ballerina and moving into yearning moments of sharing a pas de deux, or lifting this woman into the air, you know, and using all my strength to hold that female shape, you know, that helped me heal a bit with the loss of my mother. I couldn't touch her, but I could do ballet and feel like I was touching her. I started to play music. This is an interesting story. I started to play the piano. My mother was a wonderful piano player. And after she died, the piano sat in our house like a tombstone. And I went up to the piano and I lifted the keyboard one day, and I just started trying to play Endless Love by Lionel Richie. Because I wanted to say that to my mother, Endless Love. You know, and I went dun 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 dun, you know, dun 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 dun, you know, and it made me cry. It made me be able to cry. You know, it's hard when you're in that situation to find anybody who's going to help you cry, but you need to cry. So that helped me. Crazy story, when I went for my first premiere of Spartacus in Los Angeles, after the premiere I went to a restaurant and Lionel Richie was in that restaurant. And I walked up to him and I said, Mr. Richie, I have to tell you a story. It's my first time in Los Angeles. I'm here for the premiere of a show called Spartacus. I'm an actor now, but my beginning of my journey as an artist was picking up a piano lid after my mother died to play your song, Endless Love. And he went, sit down, join us. I was with a very pretty Italian girl who sat down on the other side of him. We had this conversation and everything like that, and we walked out, the little Italian girl went, he asked my phone number. So, look, you can't change the lion pride, is there? But anyway, but just going back, so, you know, all of this emotion, you know, was what spurred me into being an actor. You know, when I got to play Crixus, you know, the roar. I remember the first, who watched Spartacus? Do you remember in Gods of the Arena when we had to do Gods of the Arena because Andy unfortunately was sick, and we had to film a prequel, and the story fell on the shoulders of Crixus. Really, like Crixus was arriving in the ludus like Spartacus had. That was sort of the same story, but Crixus now. And so I had this very first scene that I had as a warrior, where I came out into the arena, and we'll talk about favourite scenes. That scene, you know, when Crixus first in the first season, Crixus we came out and said, "Shall I begin?" And he'd look at Spartacus and go, "Your wife is nothing but there's kids around, and she's been by 100 Roman." You know, and then I'd walk around like this, and you know, then we'd put stuff in the soup that he was eating, the gruel and stuff like that. And I'd sit there going, you know, yeah, you know, come on, man, I'm top dog. Try to get through this wall. And I played it with the most intimidating. My producer came up to me 3 episodes into Spartacus, and he said, "Manu, what are you doing? Everybody hates you. We're getting letters from the fans to kill your character, to wipe him out. And we've got a romance story for you in the next episode. You're meeting a girl called Navia, and it's meant to be a romance, and nobody's going to watch this romance if they think you're a big ass." And I said, Rob, please trust me. Just trust me on this one. And I'm going to jump back a little bit again. I was in the car accident with my mother. People ask me whether these scars that I've got on my forehead are makeup. because they stand out in the shows that I do, and they think like, oh, they make him a tough guy, so they put those scars on his face. This was from getting thrown out the window as our car got hit by a drunk driver and it spun sideways into a telegraph pole, which killed my mother. As it span in the air, it threw me out the side window. That was going through the glass, and that was landing on the road. When I woke up in hospital, my eye was completely closed. I was a 14-year-old kid. I thought that I'd died on the street. I remember waking up momentarily and having these pins and needles, and I went, oh, I'm dead. And I remember just blanking out. But when I woke up in the hospital 2 weeks later after being in a coma, this eye closed. I woke up and I was like, and I looked sideways. My worst enemy from school was at my bedside. It was an unparalleled moment in my life of learning a lesson about something. Me and this guy would walk up to each other in school. He wrote, and I'm sorry if this offends anybody, but I remember walking into class one day and he wrote, "Bennett is a nigger," across the blackboard. And I walked in and I was going like, oh, it was Sisley, Matt Sisley, and he had this mullet haircut and was kind of like a big guy, you know. And every time I saw it, we'd be like this, and we'd be like, "No, come on, man, come on. You want to have a fight? Come on, man. You got it? I got it, man. You want to bring it? Come on." And we never actually came to blows. Strangely enough, him and me never had a fight. But it was so intense, the amount of toxicity between him and I wake up from a coma after my mother's been killed, and here's this guy standing next to my bed. And he looks at me and he walks over and he puts his hand on me and I can't remember his exact words, you know. "You okay, man?" "Yeah." Anyway, I then find out that when he was young, his mother and father separated and he never grew up with his mother. And so he was an angry young man. Never had that soft touch, you know. When I arrived at the school, he just seemed to be like an arsehole, you know. He just was this guy with angry, he'd look at me to be like this, you know. And I'd look at him and I'd go like, "What's your problem, man?" You know, I had a beautiful mother, I had a good father, I was an athlete, I did breakdancing, I wore gel in my hair. You know, and here's this guy with just wearing black with a mullet haircut going like, "I hate you." You know, we were kind of opposites, you know. I represented the things he didn't have. Him and I became best friends. I'm going to his 50th in October, you know. But we're all turning 50. But, you know, and he's, you know, I was the best man at his wedding. When I did Spartacus, I based my character Crixus upon my relationship with Matthew Sisley. And I turned around, and when I was talking to Spartacus, I had to become the antagonist, or the antagonist. So I imagined what it was like between me and Matthew Sisley. Now these are just schoolboys, but the feeling's there, right? And I just looked in Andy Whitfield's face. Andy got sort of a little bit intimidated by it, to be honest. The producers came to me 2 weeks after we were in production and said, "Look, Andy's a bit uncomfortable with the way you're doing it." Because I would go into his face and I'd be spitting in his face and I'd be going like, you know, come on, man. But I was doing all this anger that I remember from the way that I was compelled with Matthew Sisley, knowing that at one stage the audience was going to learn that we were two men suffering from the same condition, and that would be able to touch the audience later. You know, so when my producer came to me and said, "What are you doing?" I said to him, "Please, just trust me." And he trusted me. And, you know, the slow growth of Crixus finally enabled, in episode 13 of Blood and Sand, for me to be on the ground, drugged by Domina, in the middle of a fight where Spartacus has asked me to join him. And he's saying, "Crixus, please understand we're the same." And I suddenly turn around, I'm on the ground, and I turn around and I tap a shield. And that uniting of Spartacus at that moment where he ran forward and leapt over the thing, just that moment of tapping the shield, I think every fan of Spartacus suddenly went, did they just connect? But that was the moment that we both realized we were both slaves. It was the moment we realized we were both in the same predicament in life, exactly having the same story. And I found that moment, resonated so much with fans. It gave me a whole premise in which that whenever I play the antagonist, whether it be Slade Wilson or whatever, I'm always trying to have that real struggle. Not an actor getting a pay packet. I have to throw my emotions and my scars and my turmoil in my life into all of my roles, and try to be honest to the audience. Because the audience sitting on the other side are going like, what's going on here? And I just think it's our responsibility, as artists, to actually release all the valve and let all that honestly into our performances. But you said to me my favourite scene. There was a moment in the very first fight that Crixus has, where he walks out into this arena for the first time, and all these people are going like, "Whoa, you're a gladiator. You're going to get killed by the top guy that's coming out in a minute." And I'm just standing there going like, and it was so opposite of the way that I played the first season that it was kind of like it was wonderful to go from there to there. And I was kind of looking around, and then the guy who played Octus, like I did ballet, this guy was like in the National Australian Ballet Company. And when he came out, he paraded and he had all this prowess of a dancer. And I was a dancer as well. I was a trained ballet dancer and dancer. And I remember when he came out, we almost just fell into a complete ballet dance. Because as dancers, you read language, you read body language, and you move with each other, You just watch the person, and they turn and you turn. And it became this clockwork that happened between me and Octus. Until we got to this brutal gladiator fight where, he came forward and did this long jeté into the air and leapt up in the air with a spear and went through the shield. And they did a special effects thing where the thing almost got me in the eye, and then I come through with my sword and go, whoa! And then we get into this big battle, that's like facing off, and I'm like kicking him into the wall and running in like, and they had this wonderful music and slow motion, and the way that they did the fight scenes really got into the emotions of the scenes and captured the action very well. And then finally, him and I charge at each other, and we're like, we're face to face, and I remember putting my head back like this as though to lend the audience the idea that maybe I had got the sword in my stomach, And I was just like this, and then the shot opens up, the camera pulls back, and the sword's gone through the middle of Octus, And he slides off the sword, and I remember just thinking to myself like, what is this emotion where you've lost everything? You've lost everything, and you've had to fight for within an inch of you fought for your life right to that moment, and now you're a slave, but a champion slave. It's a very interesting bunch of propositions you're setting yourself up for, and you've survived, and you've killed a man. So many bits of information that are going into your mind, and I remember just going like, I did this roar. I was just like, and it was just this. It was just like, and I came off the stage, and the director was like, it was great. It was great. The sound of that roar was awesome. And I walked up the side, and my producer, Rob Tappert, who always wanted me to play it like Clint Eastwood. He was always less emotion is best. He walked up to me and he said, Manu, we're going to have to reshoot that scene. I just watched it. It looked like you were crying. What was going on? And I said, Rob, seriously? I said, it's my first fight ever. I just killed a man. I don't know what's going on. It's like this guttural thing. And he said, yeah, but I need, and this is, Rob and I had to talk about, was I going to be the arsehole that everybody hated as well? So we always had this bit of tit-tat about how to make the character work best. And he was like, Manu, at the end of this fight scene, you have to be the champion. We want to see the champion. And I said, well, first of all, the scene, I get kicked around the arena right till the very end until I grab a knife and basically come up at the last second and we stab each other. And he went, yeah, well, well, maybe we can add some more scenes in and you fight back a little. So for the next week, they got an extra to come in and fight in scenes that looked like I was making my way back, as though I was fighting my way back, not just kind of like finding the sword at the end. So they built the story beats up a little bit. And then I said to him, by the way, like at the end of the scene, John Hannah, who played Badiatus, during the scene on the day, he got called away. And so he wasn't in the arena, so I didn't refer to him. And I said to Rob, John wasn't there on the day, but if you can shoot a scene of John in the audience, I'll do this, if you want the rock star moment, I'll turn around and I'll point my sword up at him and I'll just do this big, like I'm your champion now, like, okay, let me do the roar for myself and then suddenly weigh it all up and go like, and that's how, this scene took 2 weeks to reshoot and do bits to put together to mix what I put in as an emotional thing and what Rob wanted as a victory thing. And that scene, if you watch it, with all its music and all its drama, when it ends on that shot, it's like the shot that Rob wanted was the winning shot, I don't know what it would have been like if it just ended on, but if you watch the screaming shot, you'll see tears coming out the side of my face, you'll see the tears, but then it settles to this, the music gets kind of cool and Matty Artis is up in the audience, is going like, yes, yes. John Hannah, and then all of a sudden it's just this, and that was the emergence. That was the emergence scene of Crixus from, Rob had gone like, and the beginning of it, what's with the open frog mouth fly catching acting? Like he wanted to know why I came out and I was like, and I was Rob, it was the first time I've ever seen an arena. It's like all these, because Rob just wants strength, but I was able, through negotiation with him and conversation with him to bring in the emotion that I thought would work for the character and also have the victory moments, and the strong moments. But I always found that Crixus was only ever as strong as his vulnerabilities, and that's what I tried to work on more than the fights. I work on the fights equally, but the vulnerability of the character, I think, is what, at the end when he died with Navia on the ground, when he was on his knees and I'm just looking at Navia. And that scene, by the way, was such a beautiful scene. You know why it was a beautiful scene? Not because of my acting, because of her acting, because I didn't know what the hell I was going to do that day. It was the final scene I was ever going to shoot on the show. I knew there was a big farewell due for me, and I knew that they'd organised a big haka and there was going to be a big send-off. And I walked in with no idea how I was going to play my death scenes. As a matter of fact, I'd had 3 terrible death scenes in 3 different movies. And I'd never really been happy with those death scenes. And I thought, I hope I don't screw this death scene up, And when I'd walked into the studio, I'd seen the actress, Cynthia Dye Robbins, was in the corner crying. And I saw her crying and I walked over and I said, you okay, darling? And she goes, Manu, I just, she never grew up with her father. She'd met her father 1 year beforehand in London. And when she'd met him, he'd just been diagnosed with cancer and he died 6 months later. And in that moment, what she was tapping into as an actress was the loss of her father. That seeing me die was like having to let go of her father. And I just was looking at her going like, oh my God, I can see the emotion in you. I can see what you're going to bring to this scene. That's insane that you're going to... And this is what acting is about. If you find the real magic moments, you put it all in. You leave your casting photo behind, and you get in there and you go to the friggin' trenches. And she, and she was ready for that. And she, I just basically spent the whole scene on my knees, watching not Navia, but watching Cynthia Dye Robbins crying to say goodbye to her father. And I remember just looking at her. And the scene was shot really beautifully by the director. He just kept on creeping in with the camera. And there was, I didn't even see the camera. And I didn't even think about the guys that were behind me that were going to cut my head off. I just looked at her eyes and I just looked at her and I just looked at her and I just looked at her, just going like... there you are, just this. It was such a real moment. It was fantastic. Acting had gone out the window. I mean, we weren't paid actors at that moment. We were just 2 people caring for each other. 2 of the most honest scenes that I played in the whole series, just because of the nature of what was on offer. And you know, if you look up Navia and just scroll through, there will be in the first 24 photos a picture of me with my forehead against Cynthia Adai Robbins' forehead. That was 2 minutes after we'd finished the scene. And I've just gone over to her as a friend, knowing what she put into it, and I put my forehead against hers, and I didn't know that the set photographer took a photo of that. But that to me is one of the most magic photos of the whole production for me, because I remember how special that scene was, and somehow the set photographer, without us knowing, went over and went, right when her and I were like honging each other almost. We were just touching foreheads, just going like, beautiful, darling, well done, well done, well done, well done. You know, it was just a magic moment. Anyway, I hope some of that made sense. I hope I explained a bit of something.